This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What up, crowdfunders? Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and on this podcast, on this show, we talk about how to get into launching a campaign on Kickstarter, Indiegogo. We bring on real-world entrepreneurs. We dissect what they're doing right, what they're not doing so good, some of the lessons that they learned throughout their launch, and I try to get into like what actually contributed to people supporting this. Like, why is it that people pulled out their wallet, pulled out their credit card, and supported the project? How do you do the same thing? How do you copy those strategies? How do you copy those techniques? And this has been my mission since 2015. I started producing the show. We have over 200 episodes with incredibly successful entrepreneurs, individuals whose stories are just phenomenally inspirational. And a lot of people like you who, quite frankly, maybe they were doing something else. They had a 9-to-5 job they didn't like. They were doing some other type of work and they want to make a career-changing, shifting decision. Today's episode not only is inspirational, in my opinion, the story behind this entrepreneur, but it's also super practical because we brought on a crowdfunder who has raised over $1 million for Root, the Underworld Expansion. This is a tabletop game, and this is also not his first project. Patrick Leader, he basically launched 6 campaigns via crowdfunding, and they built off of each other. So it went from small to big, and this is one of his largest campaigns ever. So this is part of his new brand. Well, not his new brand, but his brand that started a number of years ago, Leader Games. And this is just kind of him, I guess, deciding to go out on his own and produce something that other people can play and other people can enjoy. And you hear a little bit about that story and how his team has grown over the years. It's phenomenal, man. And also some of the tips and tricks that he shares on this interview, I think are really killer. So if you've never listened to this podcast before, I also have a great resource for you if you are interested in launching your own Kickstarter campaign. Number 1, go and check out the Kickstarter launch formula. I have an Audible book there available for you where if you're interested, you can get a free 30-day trial of Audible and also grab a copy of the Kickstarter launch formula for free, or you can just grab a copy outright. And I kind of read that book myself with my same pizzazz and passion that I do with this podcast. And I try to bring to you all of the things that I've learned in the last 6 years being in the crowdfunding industry and some of the techniques that are proven to work to get you funding. It really speeds up the whole process of launching a fundraising campaign or launching a crowdfunding campaign. The other link that I got for you here is if you want to join my newsletter where I share advice and tips on a weekly, sometimes a bi-weekly basis, depending on how busy I am that week. You can go to crowdcrux.com/subscribe, enter your name and email there. That's crowdcrux.com/subscribe. And the link for the Kickstarter launch formula is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. I think you're going to like today's episode. Stick around until the end because I also have something I'd love to share with you. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. I'm excited to bring to you a $1 million crowdfunding campaign. This project for Root, the Underworld Expansion, has raised more than $1 million off of a $25,000 goal for a really cool tabletop game. And I'll let the creator tell you a little bit more about that. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So we're currently kickstarting Root, the Underworld, which is an expansion for the game called Root. And Root, we of course kickstarted about 15 months ago in October of boy, when was that? October 2000.
2018, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Time
No.
flies.
2017.
Oh,
October
2017.
2017. Yeah, yeah. And then we released it at Gen Con 2018. Sorry, I've been running a Kickstarter, so I'm a little sleep deprived. Uh,
Understandable.
and yeah, we wanted to, we ran out of units, and we decided to get it back out there, add the expansion, get people see how much interest there was, and obviously we're going to reprint it, but to gauge how much interest there was in a reprint was tricky with the orders we were getting from distributors, so we decided to put it back on Kickstarter.
Awesome, man. So I'd love it if you could tell the audience a little bit about Root. If they've never played this game before, can you give them like a teaser, like an idea of what it's like to play this, who it's for, people that have been liking it?
Yeah. Sorry. Root is a asymmetric area control game, and so I'm kind of trying to shy away from the term war game, but it's guys on a map and they're fighting each other for control of territories, which in this case are clearings in a forest. And the people that are fighting are not people; they're animals, anthropomorphic animals that are fighting each other. And they form various groups within the game called factions or roles. I think it's factions. And so there's like the Marquise de Cat, who has conquered the woods recently, and she has troops in every clearing when she starts the game. And she's playing just kind of since it's asymmetric, everyone's playing by different rules and different victory conditions, or not victory conditions, they're earning points in different ways. And so she wants to build up her infrastructure. So she's adding buildings to the board with wood that she chops down, and then she gains points as she does that. The birds have come back to conquer their homeland. They are playing just a more straight-up war game, but the challenge for them is that they have to program their turn each turn, and the program is persistent. So each turn, they have to do everything they did on the last turn, plus one or two more things. And as that becomes more and more complicated for them, eventually they won't be able to satisfy part of their programming, or their decree, as it's called in the game, and they'll collapse.
Very cool.
There's also,
I would just say, really, to cut in there, you got a lot of praise for this game too. Like, I was looking through your campaign, some people saying everything in Root feels really well thought out, balanced, meticulously crafted, artwork is out of this world. You have other people saying that it was far and away the best, most impactful, innovative game of 2018. So you've got a lot of people who said very nice things about this. So let me ask you like a dumb question here. I know you've created a lot of different other projects on Kickstarter. Like, what's been your role here with these different campaigns?
So in my first my first campaign was a game called Trick or Treat, just a little double deck card game, just to kind of learn the process of publishing. For Vast, which was Vast the Crystal Caverns, which was my next project, and Vast the Fearsome Foes, which eventually came out of the second Vast campaign. I was the designer of those games. A fellow named David Somerville started the design for Vast, and I took over the design and worked with him to build a new game from his kind of what he had been working on, and release that. So I worked as the designer. Some of the development I passed over to a guy named Kyle Wolfel, who helped me with the development and then getting it to the market. And then I've been doing all the marketing for all the Kickstarters as I go. But I do have consultants that come in and do editing and layout and things like that too. So I can't do those things.
So I'm looking here. I think at the beginning of the intro, talking about like a huge campaign like yours. I think it's amazing. Like, it's incredible. Congratulations on your success so far. But looking back into your like initial campaigns, so like for example, Trick or Treat, the card game that raised just over $3,000. Your next one was like $148K. Your next one was like $500K. It's been building, man. Like, you've been growing here.
And then for Root, of course, Root is designed by Cole Worley, and the art's done by Kyle Farron, who's done art for all my games. And then I designed the expansion, but he has been involved in helping us kind of shape it and develop it as we go. So, I've been building on. My audience has just been growing and growing and growing. Vast the Mysterious Manor was a little bit smaller. I think it was just because it was sort of a new ask, and we didn't quite know how to frame it for people. But then obviously Root has just been gangbusters. So
was this first project, like, was that the first game you ever released, or did you, independently publish games before, or was this like your first foray into this?
So I had designed a game called Five Fingered Severance, which is an amazing game, commanding a 5.4 on BGG right now, 5.4 rating on BGG. I had published that with a fellow named James Manthe, who is kind of a Kickstarter guru now, and he runs a company out of Milwaukee, which is not too far from where I live. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I published that game with him. And kind of watched him and learned the process of how to talk to the printer, how to talk to the layout people, and how to get the thing made. And also learned a lot just by going to a convention with him about how to actually, here is the thing I want to sell you. Here's how I approach, how I talk to the person and how I approach selling something at a convention.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what were you doing beforehand?
I worked for about 16 years as a database analyst. 10 of those were at a local college, doing the sort of the system that maintained the grades and the finances for the college.
Is this now your full-time gig? Like you
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's 7 people's full-time gigs right now. I do this full-time, and then Cole and Kyle are both on staff in my creative team. We have a graphic designer named Nick, and then we have 3 ops people who do help us just get the thing around the country and ship it and sell it and so on. So
you went from a database analyst to being able to do your own publishing, basically company, for games.
Yes.
Did you actually think you'd be able to do that out of curiosity?
No. So I was probably 2014. Like in 2011, I had grown very dissatisfied with my work at the college, and I tried changing jobs to help fix that. I was very well paid for the type of work I did at that college, and I was looking at other places I could go to, and there weren't a lot of options for me to go and get a better paying job out without going corporate and I was having trouble making that conversion. A lot of people saw, since I was working for a nonprofit, is that work not being as valuable as for-profit organizations. So I was having trouble making that translation. And so I changed jobs within the organization. I wouldn't say I exactly thrived in that environment either. And it was just every year I was just coming back with less and less push to get things done. I had a kid and around that time, and I just saw myself talking to her about the work I did and how little joy it was bringing me, and I couldn't keep doing that. I just could, and of course she was 1, so she didn't understand what I was talking about, but I couldn't see myself in the future saying hey, just do a job you don't like and everything will be okay. And so I knew I had to make a change in my life. Unfortunately, the school came to the same conclusion, and we had a conversation about it, and I left. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my call to action to get this working. I had already purchased from David Somerville the game that would eventually become Bast, and so I took while I was searching for a job, I spent a lot of time. To replace that job, I spent a lot of time, because I still had to take care of my family. I spent a lot of time working on the game and getting it ready. And I managed to find a contract job. And then about 4 months in that contract, I went to my boss and said, hey, I'm going to go start this thing, this Kickstarter. I don't know where it's going to go. I'll see you in 2 or 3 days once I kick it off. I went downstairs that day. I went downstairs. I worked, my office was in a downtown high-rise. And I went downstairs to the coffee shop in the first floor of that building and literally kicked it off from that place in the from the coffee shop. I started sobbing after I launched it, because it was just so stressful getting it ready. And so I was in this coffee shop just crying, just because I was so tired.
Yeah.
And
it's a make or break moment,
Yeah. And it took off, and I came back the next day to work. I didn't take the 2 or 3 days I'd said I would, and then it funded at 4 the next afternoon, and I was like, oh man, now I actually got to make this thing.
Jeez, what did that feel like? Now you have people around the world that are kind of I want this thing to exist. It's a big validation.
Yeah, it felt really good. It felt really because I'd been working for 4 or 5 months without any. Besides the playtesters for Vast, I didn't get any feedback about the project. No one was saying good job or no one was talking about it. I had taken it to Gen Con the August before. I launched it, and I got a lot of good feedback then. The Saturday of Gen Con, we ended up with a line of people waiting to play the demo, and I didn't know to do 15-minute demos, so I was playing full games with people, and we actually had 2 groups waiting in line to play, even though the demo was 60 to 90 minutes, and so I knew we were on, we'd hooked onto something special, and people were really interested in what we were doing. And then at the point that the project funded, it was unbelievable. Again, I cried a little right in the middle of my office, surrounded by the other programmers I was working with, and it was like, and
it's a wild
the guy
ride.
who's training me at that job was like, just give him a minute. I can see why he's freaking out. Fortunately, that job fell apart. And which was good because I was working probably 16 hours a day between it and the Kickstarter.
Yeah, full-time job, definitely. I mean,
running
a campaign, so.
Yeah, and it wasn't my performance. It was just in fact, I was really excelling at it, but the company got sold, and then they laid off a bunch of people. So, and my job there was kind of fun, and then it got kind of unpleasant. So I left and went to work on the Kickstarter full time.
So let me ask you a question here. I think there are a lot of board games out there in the audience, a lot of creators who are really good on maybe the design front or really good on like the mechanics of the game. But when it comes to actually presenting this to an audience, they kind of struggle. How did you actually learn about like the whole Kickstarter component, like how to put together a good page and a video? Were you like researching other campaigns? Were you reading? What were you doing?
I didn't do a ton of reading, and I probably should do more. I still don't. I just kind of went and looked at. I mean, I'd already probably backed 4 or 5 Kickstarters when I started Trick or Treat, and I'm gonna go back and find out it was probably more like 20. So I did a lot. I looked at other people's projects, and I looked at the projects I had backed, and I said, what is it about these projects that made me convert into a customer? What did I like about it? What was presented here that I wanted to see? I don't watch a lot of other people's videos. Back, 4 or 5 years ago, you saw a lot of like kind of desperate pitches at kitchen tables, and then somebody's playing the game with their nieces and nephews or something like that. And so I tended to avoid watching the videos because of those sorts of things. But I looked at the page, I looked at the layout, I looked at how things were communicated, I looked at if there was a clear, I started to learn to look to see if there's a clear ask, like what were the funds for, what were they going to do with the money, and that started to form my opinion about how I wanted to build the Kickstarter. And again, working with the people that did my layout, they also were Kickstarter backers, and so when we started to build pages, we started to look at how to build. I would look at my early pages as good examples of how to build a Kickstarter. I think a lot of what we did with Fast was just reacting to we got 40 questions today about X, so
yeah, understandable.
X,
when it comes to that question, you come into different campaigns, you're kind of asking, what is making me want to support this, or what is making me being pushed over the edge here to become a backer? What were some of the answers that you discovered to that question?
Oh, so for me, and I said this recently on Twitter, I already have the board games in my life that I want to play. And that's the hard part about asking me to buy another board game, right? Is I could be happy playing Race for the Galaxy for the next 5 years still, even though I've played it quite a bit. I could be happy just playing Puerto Rico. I could be happy playing Agricola, and other titles that I already have. And so what has to hook me on a campaign is obviously there's that unique gameplay that I'm looking for, something new to the formula that I'm looking for, and that's a big draw for me. But really, and I said this in my Twitter post, I could just go back and play those 10 games, but I do tend to look at games that are visually appealing and draw me in that way. There's some sort of artistic expression that is unique, or there's a unique voice that's being brought to the campaign, and that's what's drawing me in to support the campaign is that uniqueness. And I think to my own credit, I think Vast and Root, because of the work of Kyle Farron and us working with him on the art direction, he does most of the art direction, but we still input how we want things to look, and getting that really not crisp, I mean, like that's that bright pop of his visual style into every campaign, I think has really contributed to our success.
Yeah, I think that's a huge component because it also just kind of adds to the flavor and like the character of the game, and it's more fun to play, honestly. It's nice and fun to look like. I remember I would play Magic cards all the time when I was younger, and it's just because like the cards look freaking cool. And they have like all these tiny details like quotes and stuff like that, and it's just kind of more fun.
Yeah, those are all the quotes and VAST were written by David Somerville. He came back and wrote all those, and I still love them. I love how he made the dragon. Every dragon card, it says something different, and even though it's the same card over and over.
I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. So I want to get into like some of the advice that you can pass on to the audience here with, you've launched, I think it's 6 campaigns now.
Yep.
Your most recent one, it got funded instantly, now over the 7-figure mark, so doing really well. What are some of the things you'd like to pass on to the audience in the way of, Kickstarter lessons or tips that you have for them?
Yeah, sure. So the number one, I think, is I see a lot of people out there who are. I was in a talk with Scott Gata at PAX Unplugged, and he talked about this. There is a wonderful, amazing, probably the best board game ever designed is out there on somebody's shelf right now, unpublished, right? Because we, as publishers or the designer, hasn't taken it to Kickstarter or whatever. They just don't know how to make that connection, and so I think like. You can be the best designer in the world, and if you can't market your idea to either the publisher or to the public, in the case of doing a Kickstarter, then you're going to have a challenge getting that really awesome game out there. So I really, really strongly recommend you spend. I've told people in the video game industry that I've worked with, like, if you're going to go to a show, spend 30 seconds. Spend an hour repeating the same 30-second pitch over and over into the mirror until you have it down cold. Like, it is really important to say, hey, what's your game about? And then if you start stumbling over, well, it's kind of like Stardew Valley, but blah, blah, blah. That's not going to work for people. You need to just come out and say,
get your pitch down.
Yeah, VAST is a 1 to 5 player asymmetric dungeon crawler. Everyone's playing different roles in the dungeon. Do you want to hear more? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. And so I think that's really valuable. But the marketing beyond that is you need to get. We worked very hard up front for VAST. I went to conventions and I played the game with people. We did a huge work in progress on BGG, thanks to David Somerville, who's a marketing expert. So he did a huge work in progress thread on BGG, and people were discussing the mechanics and asking for us to kickstart the game long before we even thought about kickstarting it. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of grassroots thing was very helpful. And then I started working with other publishers and helping them, and they started helping me. And so when it came time to ask, hey, can you help me fund this thing? We had a built-in audience already. The people that were on the work in progress, the people who played it at Gen Con. And we had these other publishers who started like retweeting my stuff. Tim Fowers mentioned me in one of his updates for one of his campaigns. I think it was Burgle Brothers. And then I got a ton of cross traffic because of that. And it was really easy. Having an established audience before I got to Kickstarter, I was able to move right into funding. Mm-hmm. And then by maintaining that audience, maintaining relations with them, by delivering, I think, great customer service and delivering our goals. We've been late a couple times, but we've always delivered. I've just been able to continually build on that audience over and over and continue to bring. Every campaign is about bringing them back and what do they want to see in the campaign, as well as newcomers. And I think we've done a really good job of that.
Totally. So it's all about the relationship with the audience, all about understanding with the value that you're conveying there and sort of working to build those bonds also with the people in your community. Did you do anything like in the way of like paid ads? I don't know, like ads on Board Game Geek or ads on Facebook or anything like that?
Yeah, we do use a few of those. We use Board Game Geek. We do a Facebook ad and we promote some tweets. I think we've done a sprinkling of even sponsored content here and there. I haven't done any sponsored reviews though. I'm still, the jury's still out in my mind about that, as far as if I want to participate in that or not. I get it though. I get that the content creators have to be able to make a living. I just need to figure out how I'm gonna approach that problem. But
Definitely.
I've definitely done sponsored content. We sent out 70 copies of Root to reviewers when we got it, when we got our first shipment in, and that helped explode it a little bit, and just things like that. So.
Yeah. Also, within the campaign, like there are ways you can continue to boost funding. Like you have add-ons for your project.
Yep.
Stretch goals, actually, that's a question I have for you. Is I've sort of gotten mixed messages on stretch goals. Like some creators say, I think they're awesome. You got to have them, creates momentum. Other ones are saying, it kind of complicates things. I don't know if you really want to have stretch goals. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so every campaign we've done so far, we've done stretch goals kind of by the seat of our pants. We kind of saw what the velocity of the campaign was going to be. We had a few planned out, but then we would add them on based on kind of user conjecture or client conjecture. Like they would say, "Oh, it'd be nice if we had X," and be like, "Oh, okay, well, we are going to do X," as it turns out, and then we'd put it in as a stretch goal later on, and that has been great for like getting sales. It has been terrible for like, oh, we just added a ton of cost or a ton of development
The
on.
profit, yeah.
Yeah. I think the big one for Root was, and in fact, a lot of people are seeing like, you see those big Kickstarters and you think I'm taking a lot of money home. There's been some huge hits to our profit margins, and so I wouldn't say I was taking much home until this year, but.
It's one of those things where, like, if you want to get a quality game out there, there's a lot of things you don't even think about, like shipping, fulfillment costs, delays, paying people. There's a lot of things that go into that.
And I got to have a logistics person full time now, so that's going on. But so like for instance, the card holders in Root, we had to cut that back from 5 to 1 card holder in the expansion, and it was just because the card holder was almost as much as the rest of the game, like in the box, and it also added a ton of weight onto ship, so it was really increasing our cost. So we reduced it down to 1, and we've gotten a little flack for that, but it is what it is. This campaign, we are not doing any
Stretch goals? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting experiment. A lot of people have come out and said, actually, we put 3 things into the campaign. You're getting a free deck of a new replacement deck for the game. It doesn't replace it, like it's just a variant. If you want to play with it as a different deck, it replaces it. So we did that. We replaced the deck. We've added resin clearing markers for the maps that use the clearing markers, and we also put in a sleeve of meeples for the vagabond character.
Okay. So adding more value that way, definitely.
Yeah, and what we said was these are essentially your stretch goals. We've just unlocked them all at the start, and so you can get them now, and they will be separate items in retail. So you are getting them essentially for free.
Well, I didn't mean to cut in there. I was just going to say, one of the common questions while we're talking about like costs that I always get is on the topic of shipping. Yeah. And understanding, like, should that be built into the reward price? Is that something that people add on? There's a lot of confusion there, I think. Do you have any thoughts on that issue?
I've always used Kickstarter's built in, just add on to the shipping cost automatically. So you when you back, you select your country and it gives you the cost. And we do our best to estimate the shipping cost before we go into the project. Obviously, we're not holding the item at the time that we estimate the shipping cost, so we've made some mistakes there. And I don't mind eating a few dollars there because we're essentially cutting out everyone in between us, and so we're making quite a bit more money on the project anyway, or per unit that we sell on the project anyway. So I just put the cost up there. I know some people like to do it in backer kit later when they have a better idea of how much things are going to cost, or closer to the time it ships, just in case the shipping prices go up. We've been hurt a little bit by that. We also, the shipper that we work through passes just the cost of the shipping through to us, as well as the handling fees. So, and they do a lot of volume, so we get a pretty good rate on our shipping anyway.
Understandable.
Yeah, so we've always done it up front. We haven't really built it into the cost of the project, except for, like, I think in the U.S. we charged $10 last time we shipped, and it ended up being about $12.50 a unit to ship. So we lost $250 out of the retail price, which wasn't the end of the world.
So I just have a few more questions for you, but before I get to those, I just want to ask you, now you have like 12,000 backers for your current project, and that's a lot of people. You're impacting a lot of lives. People are gathering around, they're playing games with their family, with their friends. What's like one of the most rewarding part of this entire journey for you? Because you started out doing a job you didn't like. You sort of transitioned, making some very difficult decisions, some very impactful decisions, and now you're kind of doing what you always set out to do. What's been the most rewarding aspect of that story?
So I have a couple like hits here. Is I think like just like the pride in what I'm doing, and then I'm making something that changes other people's lives. I think it's been pretty amazing to me. I think one of the hazards of programming is that you're either contributing a code to a very large system that you don't really feel impactful in, or people just tend to they ask you for something and you deliver it, and then they move on very quickly to the next problem. So I never felt particularly rewarded in that situation, except for the monetary compensation. So I think that's for me, that's been the biggest, I just feel like every day I get up and I'm like, there's just a sense of purpose about what I'm going to do that day. And there's clearly been moments that are bad in publishing. I mean, there's always going to be adversity in a job. I love going to the conventions and interacting with people at that level, teaching them how to play the game, watching it catch on with them, watching them play, and then have them come back and talk to me about their advanced strategy or how they turned on 5 more of their friends to the game or anything like that. It's just amazing for me to see. So
I used to dabble in computer programming. I was okay at it, but one of the things I really liked about it was you could actually create something from scratch. Like you created something new basically that existed. And
right.
that just seeing that finished product was so cool. It's oh my gosh, I made that, And I could imagine that you might feel similarly, when you're pulling together creative artists and people to help bring this together, and then this is actually a physical thing that exists in the world. I could also see that being pretty cool, I think.
And I think to me too, the other gratifying, maybe the most amazing part is that now that I have a team working with me, is to see all the different points of view coming together about how a project should be delivered, and we can discuss it, and we can make one cohesive piece. That was one of the things the other things I was going to talk about as advice for people was that we have I think part of our success is the studio approach that we're taking, where we're designing everything internally, has created a great environment for us to be creative and to work in. So
you mean instead of contracting out that work?
Yeah, we contract very few things now at this point. Like some of our videos we contract, and the editing we contract, and that is by design because I don't want to be the editor's boss. But eventually we'll hire an editor. There's probably not enough work for us to have an editor full time yet anyway. But yeah, but everything else is in house. I mean, all the design development. Cole works for me. I designed the Underworld Expansion, and so we worked together on the in-house. We worked and play tested together right here where I'm sitting right now. Nick is leading the development for the expansion, and so
you're heading up all this pretty much.
Yeah, and we all get to work together with, and Cole is still there, acting as sort of roots. That's not root, this is root. Sort of the making sure that the brand is kept strong. So
you've kind of transitioned from a hired gun to then having your own job, and then to kind of having to lead a team. What are your thoughts on leadership? I know it's a really general kind of broad subject there, but in this transition, what do you think is most important when it comes to that aligning people towards completing something like this?
I think people want to know that their opinion is valid and important inside of this situation. I think that's pretty universal to all people working anywhere, unless it's a really set process. So I think giving them with Cole, saying, Cole, we're going to work on root, bring it to me, show me how to design it, how to build it, and him working on that and developing the project plan for that, and just trusting him to have the right idea. I do tend to trust people a lot, and I think
you gotta,
I expect my employees to treat me right and to treat each other right, and that's been working out pretty well so far.
Well said. So my last question for you here is this is actually a question that I wanted to know the answer to.
Yeah.
And that is, I've been looking at some of your other projects and like the Kicktrack stats, and we always see, of course, within the last like 4 days, last 3 days, a huge jump in pledges towards the ends of these campaigns. Do you ever do anything like strategically to take advantage of that, or like are you like hammering your list hard, like reminding them that this is going to end soon, or is that just kind of like a natural thing that happens?
It's a natural thing that occurs because if you click the Remind Me Later button in Kickstarter, which I think a lot of people do just as they kind of want to come back and see how the project evolved, that reminds you 48 hours before the end of the campaign. That reminder goes out 48 hours from the campaign. And so you're going to see a big jump, a big surge at the end there. You also, I mean, I've backed projects in the last 30 seconds because I'm suddenly like, oh, I gotta get on that before I miss out. Yeah. And yeah, I'm sure you've done it. And so I think that's part of it. I mean, we have kind of leaned into it a little bit with our last, like with the Root project. We went to PAX Unplugged and we're demoing it all weekend. And then the 48-hour alarm went off that night. And so if you look at the curve for Root, you see the 2 or 3 days before the 48-hour warning goes off, we get this nice uptick from the convention. And then I feel like when people saw the reminder, then they saw that swell growing, and they backed with confidence because they knew that a lot of people were interested in it. And they saw people at PAX Unplugged talking about it on Twitter or talking to their friends about it. And then there was just people coming back from PAX Unplugged and pulling out the card for it and saying, oh, yeah, I want to back this. And so we kind of leaned into it and timed it with the end of the campaign. We're doing that with PAX East, and this campaign, that's why our campaign's a little bit shorter. And but yeah, I think that last 48-hour swell is mostly just because of the 48
the reminder. Yeah. Very cool, man. Well, for those that are listening, you want to check it out. It's Root, the Underworld Expansion. You can go and search Kickstarter for it. We have 13 days to go at the time we're recording this, or at Ledger Games, LEDER Games.
Yeah, it's actually Leader Games.
Leader Games. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about
no
that.
problem.
Leader Games. All right, man. Well, I'm going to let you have the last word here. If you want to leave the audience with a final bit of advice or a word of encouragement, or maybe something that you wish you knew when you just quit your job there, and we're venturing off on your own, would love. I'll give you the last word here, and also any other links you want to plug.
At PAX East, I was on a panel about being a parent and being a game developer, because it is a very time-consuming job. Sometimes I work till 1 a.m. And I said to the panel, I was like, I don't recommend having a kid so this happens to you, but having a kid focused me so much on my career, so much more than I had before. But anyway, that's not my advice.
Have a kid.
Don't have a kid. Please don't do that.
I've heard that multiple times too. Like when you have a kid, it really like lights a fire under you, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And I just wanted to make the world good for her. So I think that what I want to leave people with is if you're designing at home right now and you want to be a designer, you want to be a publisher, don't be afraid to just design purely for the art of it and get that down really well before you start moving into the publishing. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people getting into the publishing because Kickstarter's made it so easy before they're ready to have their game critiqued by other people, before they're really ready to write rules that other people can take. And of course I designed Vast, so I'm living in a glass house here. But to be able to articulate what they want the game to do, and then deliver both the artistic theme and how to play the game successfully, it just takes a lot of practice. And don't be afraid to design a game, throw it out, design a game, throw it out, design a game, throw it out, until you're very comfortable doing what you're doing. Vast was easily probably the 15th, maybe the 20th design in my portfolio before I really got serious about publishing, and I don't regret that time at all.
Well said. Very well said. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, being very generous with your time. I appreciate you also sharing a bit of your story and tips, and we'll have to have you back.
All right. Thank you. I'd love to be back.
Let me tell you about our latest sponsor, SendPro Online by Pitney Bowes. Shipping can be complex. Things can get really confusing really fast. With SendPro Online, it's easy to save time and money no matter what you send, from letters and packages to overnights and flats. You can easily compare USPS, UPS, and FedEx in an all-in-one online tool. You can print shipping labels and stamps directly from your printer. You can even track all of your shipments and get email notifications when they've arrived. SendPro Online is only $14.99 a month, and listeners can get a free 30-day trial when you visit pb.com/crowdcrux. That's pb.com/crowdcrux. Experience the convenience of SendPro Online for yourself when you sign up for a free 30-day trial. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and man, I thought that was a phenomenally inspirational podcast episode. The fact that you can go from having a 9-to-5 job that you don't like, working for a boss maybe that you can't stand, and in this day and age, use crowdfunding to accelerate the transition to an entirely new career, to build a business out of thin air, doing something like producing tabletop games, tabletop card games, nonetheless. Like, that's incredible. That fact that opportunity exists, and all you have to do in order to sort of do the same thing is get serious about it, is start really wanting to make a big change in your life. And I hope I can be a very small part of that change. It's been a privilege to me to be able to reach so many people with this podcast. I have, of course, a resource I'd love to share with you that's, I think, relevant to launching a campaign on Kickstarter, which is the Kickstarter launch formula. And this book, goes all through the step-by-step process of how to launch a campaign, some of the tricks that I've discovered, sort of the formula, if you will, that causes campaigns to get funding. We talk about all of that on the Kickstarter launch formula, which you can grab a copy on Audible or on Amazon. And the link for the Audible version is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. The other thing that I want to share with you is kind of more close to the heart, because I have always been frustrated when I try to do something new in my life, and there aren't really good teachers with good information and good education. And that's part of the reason why I got into the crowdfunding industry. But this same kind of experience happened to me when I wanted to become a podcaster, when I wanted to start putting out podcast episodes. Have you ever thought that maybe you have a message that the world needs to hear? That you've learned something, that you have a perspective, that you have life experience, that could you reach more people, it would impact them. And you almost owe it to yourself to put yourself on that spotlight and actually share that message with the world. I think that starting a podcast is phenomenal because you can reach people literally all over the world, internationally, and you can move them with your stories and guests and experiences and the things that you've learned in your life. I'd actually love to ask you that question directly. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Because podcasting is growing a ton. Not only is my show doing phenomenally well, but also many other podcasters out there are using podcasting to grow their business, to get more brand awareness, to connect with cool guests and almost use it as a networking opportunity, and to also show their customers and show their listeners that they know what they're talking about. Podcasting is also great because it allows you to connect with people in a deeper way. If you're watching a YouTube video, okay, you'll watch like a 5-minute video. You read a blog post, you kind of skim it. With a podcast, you have your listeners tuned in for 40 to 60 minutes at a time. They really get to know you in a more intimate setting and in a more intimate way, and they are also moved by the stories that are shared on your show. It's so freaking powerful, man. And that's kind of why I wanted to share a link with you today that will kind of make it step by step and much more easy for you to get started with podcasting if that is something you're interested in doing. So this link, number one, I'm going to share with you a basic podcasting package. Like if you want to get a microphone that's pretty cheap, you want to sound good, you want to know how to actually record guests, I will share with you how to do this in this free course that I'm about to mention. In addition, some of the things that I've learned since starting my podcast in 2015, things that will speed up the process, ways to market your show, things I learned about speaking, I'm going to share that with you. And finally, some of the low budget hacks, if you will, to get a podcast going and to start to have a snowball effect effect where you're going to start getting more and more listeners and more downloads. So I'm going to share a few of these lessons with you if you are interested in starting your first podcast. And that link is crowdcrux.com/free podcasting course. crowdcrux.com/free podcasting course. Just enter that into your browser, enter your name and email, and you can get started learning from me about how to start your own podcast and how to monetize it, how to grow it, and how to share your voice and your message with the world. I do hope you take advantage of that because I wish I started podcasting earlier. Like, if I could go back in time, I probably would have started podcasting right when I started my blog. It's been phenomenally powerful for my business. It's so cool to be able to network with really high level guests that I would never be able to talk with, aside from that. And in addition, I've learned so much about my own industry and my own craft just from doing it. And I love the inspirational stories that come out. So if you are interested in doing the same thing and starting your own podcast, it's not as difficult as you think. It's really not. If you follow the steps that I outline here, I think it's going to be a lot easier to set up. And quite frankly, it's a lot more broken down than you might have read on like blog posts or anywhere else on the web. So finally, that link is crowdcrux.com/free podcasting course. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know, reply to some of those emails, and I will get back to you. But again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and I will see you next time.